First of all, fair warning, I employ, okay, I can't even think of, never mind. If I try to say something clever, my brain just freezes up. My brain's like a Windows 95 file system. If I have the information, it's all there. If not, good luck finding it. But anyway, I'm, again, Pete Cooney. I'm the lead data architect for Jackson National Life. We're a leading annuities provider in insurance-based investment products, if you don't know what annuities are. And I am the lead data architect for the enterprise, so I'm responsible, well, I'm accountable for data technology direction for the company. A lot of people contribute to that, so don't let anybody tell you that I'm responsible for it all. That would be a terrible lie, and I'm here to not lie to you. One of the reasons I wanted to give this talk is because, first of all, I'm going to give you a lot of information on a lot of different topics, and so feel free to take pictures of the slides and then ping me on LinkedIn to talk about any particular topic here. I'm very happy to connect, very happy to talk with folks. I've got nothing to sell, and I really enjoy talking to people who've got nothing to sell. With no disrespect to anybody here to sell something, appreciate you all and what you do, but if you want an opinion from somebody unbiased who has nothing to gain from it except helping you know something new and learning something from you, please reach out. But we live in a marvelous era. So many ways of managing data. I remember back in the day when I started implementing integrations with SAP, it was just a database. And you had some cool tools, maybe, if you're lucky, to connect the database. And then we added, cloud and lake and 85 million integration strategies. And now you're adding agents that can build more data, create more data. You used to talk about how it was important for people to create data. Now agents will be creating data, right? There's so many different options. I personally get a little overwhelmed, and I work for a relatively small Fortune 500 company. I can't even, when I worked at Wells Fargo with their AI group, it was constantly an issue of keeping all the new ideas at bay before they overwhelmed you and picking a direction that would actually work. So what I want to talk about are 5 secrets I've learned about how to make enterprise data a useful thing at your company, and what makes for successful enterprise data strategies, okay? These are all have practical angles to them, and I'm not going to list them all off. You can take a picture if you want to come back to it a little later as an anchor point, but I'll also have it in every slide. Also, again, feel free to take pictures of these things. I really don't mind. Whenever I go to a major conference, I'm the fool snapping pictures of every slide so I can read it again later. So first and foremost, one key in this current era is how you choose to do data lakehouse. I'll give you the 30-second version of data lakehouse. A data lakehouse is a common space in which you share your data from throughout your organization in a clear, consolidated, secure, governed way. There are a lot of ways to get there. The originators, I think Databricks came up with the term first, have one take on it. Microsoft has a take on it. Google has a take on it. I'll pick on Denodo, who are a good company, have a take on it. There's a variety of ways that you can get to a data lakehouse. But you're going to need it. Just put that out there. Plan for it. Even if you're 100% on-premise, you're going to need a data lakehouse. Sorry to say. So don't put off researching it, even if you're not ready for it. But don't get hung up on creating an enterprise data lakehouse to begin with. To be honest with you, starting with an eye towards the enterprise is way overrated. Resist the urge to rule the world. We all get that, especially in technology. You're like, oh, I'm going to build something for the enterprise. When I worked at a large Fortune 500 company, there was always somebody in some side department who did the secondary thing who's like, I've got an enterprise solution. I'm like, well, was anybody else using it? They're like, no, it's not an enterprise solution. And you don't need it. That's not where you start. Even if your mandate is to do something enterprise-wise, think of concrete personas. Actual kinds of people that you can help and give value to, and focus on them to start, okay? Then, once you have an idea of who you're doing this for, pick a partner as bold as you are. If you are a company who likes to take risks, or are driving a market forward, or doing new and exciting things, picking a partner or technology partners that are willing to take risks with you. Agentic AI is probably for you if you're in that category. If you're like me and heavily regulated, and I like doubly regulated because we're an insurance company and a financial services company. Welcome to insurance joy. The regulations I deal with are great big fun. I have to have a partner technologically, or partners that are more cautious. Databricks is too aggressive for me sometimes, if you can imagine that. If you work with Databricks, you're like, oh, really? They're like, yeah, they're not the biggest risk takers in the universe. They're definitely innovators, but they're not like the bleeding edge. Microsoft is our single cloud. You talk about state and kind of progressive change, right? You're not going to get any kind of massive waves out of Microsoft overnight. That's good for me. But don't pick somebody just because you know them. Don't pick somebody just because they have a cool sales rep, no matter how cool the sales reps are. And I know some really cool sales reps. Pick somebody whose strategy and whose approach to technology matches yours. And then focus first and foremost on quality, producing something of quality for your chosen persona or personas. You have to have something worth sharing if they're going to consume it. This was a mistake I've seen made multiple times. We're like, well, just get it out there. And what we just got out there was terrible. It was garbage. And that ruined our credibility. Then really, the most important concept I've learned the last year and a half is the notion of a data product. I wish I'd heard about data products sooner. Again, I will say again, there are multiple ways to create and organize data products. But again, if you're working for a customer, a persona, you're going to need a product to give them. And there's lots of material online. You could go to Claude, and it can give you a roadmap for developing a product that you could just pick up and start using, right? It's not rocket science as long as you get people in your organization on board on the basics of the process. But you have to have products to give to your customer. And I personally recommend data catalogs as a way of organizing those. There are a lot of there are a number of those in the market that are good. Again, there are also some logical layer companies that give you some technology on that front. I'll let them talk about their own stuff. But ultimately, I think probably the most salient thing to say about that is that people buy products. They don't buy collections of stuff. And they don't like to go surfing through stuff for stuff. Okay? You probably know this already, or some of you know this already. If you don't, let me say it to you. And if you have heard it, I'm going to repeat it because it's important. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Get something good quality out there to start. Even if it's incomplete, if your customer says, your internal customer, your external customer, whoever it is, says, oh, this is good, then you won. And if they say, this is great, you know what? They're going to want more. And that's what you want. You don't want to wait and come up with the perfect product and discover that your intended customer has gone off on their own and dumped something on their own. I've had this happen more than once, where we waited too long and we released something to our end customer, and they jury-rigged something on their own, like, oh, I already built that. Sunk cost. Never mind. We're not going to do anything anymore. Don't get caught in that trap. Give them something that gets them excited and have them want more. A data product that gets you going. And then improve the product or add more products. Because adoption is key. If people don't use it, what's the point? Again, I've spent too much time in my life. Probably 40% of the projects I've been involved in my life never got used beyond an initial user group, which is a horrible thing to say. Happily, that's not the situation I'm in right now. But I am trying to make sure that certain groups that I work with don't find themselves in that rut. Because again, that tendency to want to make a perfect thing really gets in our way a lot of times. So let me talk to you about the concept of enterprise data. First of all, data is your second most important organizational asset. You heard the term data is the new oil, Many of you guys have heard that phrase, data is the new oil. You ever really? Okay, I can't remember who the quote is. I really need to get this down. But this phrase is out there, that the data is the new oil, because data is a multi-purpose and very valuable thing that most people aren't using to their capability. Data is the new oil. It's incredible. There's so many ways, especially with leveraging AI, we're going to be able to use data. But it's not your most important asset. You are your company's most important asset. People are the most important asset in the company. Even in the future where we have agentic AI, that producing data, they might get bumped up to the second most important. But you will always be more important. You and I will always be more important because we ultimately do things that produce good things and produce the results that our organization needs. And we produce the data. Even if we produce the AI that produces the data somewhere down the road, we still produce the data, which makes us more important. So your enterprise data ultimately has to be important to somebody, and that means you have to determine which data is more important than others. I like my HR department just fine. Nothing wrong with my HR department. Most of their data is wildly irrelevant to me because I don't need to know or don't want to know details about my other coworkers' stuff. It just really doesn't matter to me. And I'm accountable for data use in the organization in some ways. So you think I care, but I really don't. I don't. Unless there's a practical reason for it, I really don't need to know, which is why we gave our HR a walled-off section in our data lake and that we can access through a common mechanism if we need to be. But it's like, you just keep your stuff in your own. But customer data, I mean, how important is customer data, right? I don't have to explain to anybody. Customer data is huge. Customer data is automatically enterprise quality data. You really want that out there. And you have to ask yourself, when I want to get extra enterprise data out there, look at your lake house, or wherever you're sharing data with right now. What you have there is probably already enterprise data. You already have the things that you're looking for in places where you share data. And if you're a data warehouse shop, your data warehouses probably contain enterprise data because people care about it. If you have a data warehouse that nobody's using, then guess what? That's probably not enterprise data. But what you're already sharing is something you should think strategically about and think, how do I use this better? And something you need to understand better. One of the great mistakes we in technology tend to make is that we tend to sit in a corner and make up our own rules about this data, and we don't want to go talk to the business people because of a variety of excuses. That's a mistake. You can't do that. You need business SMEs, and if you're running into resistance for business SMEs with enterprise data, then you have an organization. You don't just have a data problem, you have an organizational problem. Because you have somebody squatting on a patch of land with oil, and you need that oil for the company. Treat it like it's a crisis, politely, professionally, but still, it's a problem. People can't, in this 21st century, be squatting on data and not playing nice. The reason I'm bringing up enterprise data is because you ultimately need to understand what you're dealing with and document it just enough, and document it iteratively. And the good news is more and more tools are coming out there to help you document it. Again, several vendors who are here have slick mechanisms to help you document what you've got. But knowing what your assets are is critically important. To use the oil analogy again, if I've got like an oil-rich marsh, and I've got somebody, don't smoke, but if I see somebody light up a cigarette in like a marsh, I'm going to try and smack the cigarette out of their hand because I don't want them to blow themselves up, especially if I can see them blow me up, for that matter. You want to make sure that you understand where it is, but you don't boil the ocean. Beginning to document and doing so iteratively makes a big difference in making it feel like you're making forward progress, and then iteratively showing value to those personas that we talked about. Now, as you identify enterprise data, I strongly encourage normalizing the data. If you don't know what data normalization is, talk to 5 other people in the room. I'm sure that you'll know. If you do know, then here's my advice around it. It does matter to your consumers. Normalizing enterprise data matters to your consumers. Your consumers may be used to consuming this critical data in a denormalized fashion, but when they want to compare apples to apples, apples to oranges, separating out the apples and the oranges is a big deal. I had a real fight with, again, I'll pick on my HR department again. I had a real fight with them to make them understand that it was not okay to have the same employee information in 5 different tables. It was just wasteful. And they said, it's cloud, it's cheap. I said, well, what if you want to check, an employee's complex hiring history? Because, we, like companies, we hire and then somebody leaves and they come back. Jackson has a high degree of people coming back, interestingly enough. And so if you want to check those patterns, how do you do that with these 3 tables? Oh, we can't. No, that's why you strip out the employee and you give them their own table and you give their employment, their job a table, and then you show the relationship over time as history. In other words, you normalize that relationship so that you can then show those patterns without having to do some really horrible joining. So normalizing does matter. But it's also not the point. I know a great many data engineers, and I have been guilty of this myself, who wanted to normalize. Their instincts take over when they see a data set. They're like, oh, that should be normalized to this. Oh, that should be normalized to this. I'll give you an example from my life. Jackson, again, is fundamentally based on insurance, kind of insurance structure for what we do. So we have policies, and we sell policies through financial advisors to customers. And if you think about it, a policy is really objectively a kind of contract. But I had a dilemma when we first got and started creating an enterprise data model. Do we make policies contracts, the same kind of contract that we have with our software vendors, or with our food vendor for our cafeteria, or employee contacts? Do we put this all in one table or subset of tables? The answer is no, because none of my stakeholders would be going and looking for policy and policy information in a centralized contract table, even though that's probably the cleanest way in the real world, objectively. If I was doing research, I would do that. If you look at Accord, the insurance standards body, they do it that way. So sure, I get why people want to do that. But stripping out policy, this critical entity for me, and making it separate, has made life so much easier and made the data set so much easier to use for everybody involved. Again, the way that you determine whether normalization is important or not is to support your data products for those personas that you're trying to help. And as you build data products, you develop standards. Don't try and develop the standards up front. It's a waste of time. Develop the standards as you learn. So after your first data product is the time to start developing a standard. Or maybe after you developed 2, so you can compare them against each other, so you have some kind of patterns to work with. At the end of the day, standards will help you say, okay, this falls into this category of data. The people who want this data product want to use this kind of data which falls into this category, and therefore I'm going to spend the time normalizing it. Or maybe I'll use some sort of accelerator to normalize it for me. Or maybe I won't bother because it's already sort of halfway normalized from the source system. But also expect to learn and change. And most importantly, set expectations with your management that you're going to need to learn and change. Is if they're expecting it to be done and they don't have to worry about it again, you're going to have to work on some messaging. You can always ping me. I have some lines I use when people ask me, oh, are we done? And I have to, in a humorous way, say, no, we're never done. You don't want to say that bluntly, which I have done. It doesn't go very well, unfortunately. But you do want to let people know they can expect to have this conversation on a regular basis. If you are going to normalize at a logical layer, be careful to not put all your eggs in that basket. There are some data sets that really require to be physically normalized. Now you might be one of those lucky companies where you can logically normalize 75% of the stuff out there. But especially if you're like me and you're dealing with mainframe systems, normalization is a headache. And I need a physical layer of normalization before I can even get it out into a kind of a logical layer. So be careful not to assume that you can just automate it all. I think you can automate a lot of it, and you should look at tools, especially if you've got you're a little less risk averse of an organization. You should look at tools for speeding that up but don't assume that you can just use a tool to fix it all. That being said, what you can automate, do automate. No. But don't rely on it. Again, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they want to shortcut the hard work of data modeling. Or they want to shortcut the hard work of talking with business SMEs, like we talked about before. You can't automate a SME. I don't even care 25 years when we have AI agents who will act as SMEs. Maybe they'll be the SME, the first line SME. But you're never going to get out of talking with people. Because if you don't, you'll get the dreaded reaction to your data product of, oh, this isn't useful, after weeks, months, years of work. Don't put yourself in that situation. Do the work of talking with people and setting their expectation that you're going to have conversations. So, let me talk about how am I doing in time?
Sorry. You've got 9.
Okay, great. Let me talk about a painful lesson that I learned. And I'll start with kind of the positive and we'll go to the painful lesson. You want people to think in terms of self-service with data. And people say that a lot, but the dark, dirty secret about that is not everybody wants self-service data because they're not used to it. So when I talk about building a culture of self-service data, I mean you got to talk to your leadership and say, especially the ones who are excited about data, and say, how do we get your peers and people in their departments excited about data? I'm lucky because I have business data owners who have been willing to be partners in this regard. I've been at prior organizations where I wasn't so lucky, and it was an uphill battle getting people to think about this. But there's no excuse technologically anymore. There's no excuse technologically anymore. We're past that point. 15 years ago, you could have made an argument. 10 years ago, it was a little weaker, but it was still there. Today, we really don't have an excuse. But the key thing is, and this is the painful secret I learned, even if your data governance started with an IT effort, you can't shortcut it by having IT people make business data owner decisions themselves without the business owners actually making the decisions. You need the business data owners, and I mean business leaders. You know what the average level of my data owner is in my company? SVP. We're not a bank, so that means pretty senior level, like maybe 1 down, 2 down from C level. Senior people. Now what do? They delegate a lot, as they should, right? But they care about where their data goes and how their data is used. And you need to get, you may not need that level of leadership, but you need to have leaders who are willing to make decisions about their data and to tell other people, no, that dreaded word. And depending where you live in the United States or Canada, there are different ways of saying no. You don't, if you live in the deep south, you don't say no directly. It's sort of an oblique, wandering journey of a thing. You live in the East Coast, no is a much more pleasant thing. If you're in the Midwest, No's usually with a smile and some caveat and some sort of joke. In California, I don't even understand how people in California say no. That's a whole complex thing. But in 47 to 50 states, that's the one place I'm like, I'm still not sure how I'm supposed to communicate effectively, because I'm a Detroiter and the son of a New Yorker. So what do you do? But you have to say no. And the good news about leaders in corporations is they're usually pretty decisive, right? That's one of the reasons they got their jobs. They're decisive. So they're willing to make decisions. And you need to co-opt people like them. And you need to not only to learn from them, which we talked about, we also need to learn with them. You need to educate those leaders and get them as excited about technology as you are. One of the great joys of my job is getting business leaders excited about technology. Some of my technology peers and some of my boss is a VP, and some of his peers get annoyed at me because I get somebody too excited unintentionally about a new kind of technology that we're not going to be able to adopt for a year and a half. But at least they're excited about it and they want to do something with it. That's critical. But once you have those partners, those business partners, those data owners, data stewards, don't abuse it. Don't dump stuff on them. The immediate thing that people did when we put data stewards in place, business data stewards, is they started sending technology approvals to them. As if A, they had the context, and B, they had the time. These people our data stewards are part-time, which means they're also effective at delegating their stuff to other people in their teams. But those people also have jobs. And if you try and start taking your job and giving it to them, you lose trust. You can't afford to lose that trust. So don't go down that dark path. But then when things get rough, stay the course. There will be politics. There will be changes. I just had the joyous situation last year where two of the three most important data owners in my organization got swapped out for new roles. So we had to onboard new data owners and get them excited. That's a pain in the neck. But at the end of the day, it's something we have to do to stay the course. And there's a whole litany of organizations that will tell you, with the many permutations of data governance, how really important it is to stick with it. I heard somebody say in the last talk, and I agree with this, that any effective AI project is going to have some degree of data governance. And anything that scales in an enterprise is going to require data governance. Either deliberate, planned data governance or accidental, following afterwards data governance. And you don't want to live with those following on accidental data governances. They are horrifying. I wish I had another half an hour to tell you a couple more stories about that, but I don't. So, and finally, I swear to you, I do not own a change management consulting company. I have never worked with change management in my life in a sort of professional capacity. This is not a pitch. Other than the simple fact of the matter is we still need to manage change. We can't just roll out new technology stuff and expect people to accept it. That's not how it works. And there's a lot of change management material out there. You can start, thank you. You can start with Claude or anything like that to walk you through the disciplines of it. But basically people need to understand why they're doing it. And then you need to prioritize rolling things out to, first of all, those personas we talked about that are our good customers. We also need to roll them out, that we need to worry about what are the people who are going to be less enthusiastic, or the people who simply won't adopt. You don't like to think about those people, but there's some people who just will resist as long as they possibly can. That's part of change management. That's what you can kind of work through. And at the end of the day, change management also encourages you to quantify. We're data people. We should be quantifying our work. We should be able to quantify what we do. Even if you're in a frothy field like enterprise-level architecture like I am, I can at least say I educated these many leaders and accomplished these things, be able to measure it. So if you have a major data lakehouse initiative and you say that I'm identifying these two personas and 90% of those personas should adopt at the end of 90 days, and then these personas that are biggest resistors, I want to have 25% of them adopt after a year and a half. Those are the kinds of things you need to think about when you're dealing with this stuff. And I am out of time, so I would offer you to do more questions. But like I say, please connect with me on LinkedIn or grab me here to talk. Happy to talk more about my experience with any of this stuff. And Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.